Hey guys, tonight we slip back in time, not to a grand castle or a thundering battlefield, but to a quiet, muddy field in the last days of autumn. The air is sharp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. A low, gray sky presses down, promising a frost that will soon harden the world into stillness and silence. This is the world of the medieval peasant, on the cusp of winter. And let's be honest, stripped of your modern comforts, your insulated jackets, and your 24-hour grocery stores, and plopped down right here, you probably wouldn't last a week. It's a comforting thought, isn't it? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As always, I love seeing where you're all listening from, so feel free to drop your city or country and the time of night in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the light. It's thin, weak, and already failing, even though the afternoon is not yet old. It drains the world of color, leaving behind a palette of browns and grays. The trees are skeletal fingers scratching at the sky, and the lane you walk down to get here is a ribbon of churned mud, deeper and more treacherous than it looks. Your feet are cold and damp, a feeling you know will become a permanent state of being for the next 4 months. The air has a weight to it, a heavy, wet chill that promises rain or, worse, the first sleet of the season. Every breath you take feels like you're drinking cold water. There's an urgency in the air that has nothing to do with the Lord's command or a Reeves' impatient shout. This is nature's deadline. Winter is not just coming, it is breathing down your neck. You bend your back again, your spine and knees protesting with a familiar, dull ache. Your hands are raw, the skin cracked and embedded with dirt that will never truly wash away. You're in one of the manor's great open fields, but the joyous chaos of the main harvest is long past. That was a time of communal effort, of sweat and ale and the satisfaction of seeing golden sheaves of wheat and barley piled high. This is the quiet, desperate end of the agricultural year. You are gleaning. After the Lord's men have taken the harvest proper, the poorest villagers, the widows, the elderly, you, are permitted to scour the stubble for any fallen ears of grain. Each one you find, a single stalk with a head of precious kernels, feels like a victory. You tuck it carefully into the sack at your waist, its meager weight a constant, nagging reminder of how little there is. You work alongside a handful of others, dots of brown and gray scattered across the vast, stubbled expanse. There's not much talk. A shared nod, perhaps a grunt of sympathy when someone straightens up, hand pressed to the small of their back. Everyone is hoarding their energy, focused on the task. Your eyes scan the ground, a rhythmic, practiced movement. Stubble, stone, clod of earth, another stone. Aha! A small cluster of barley, half crushed into the mud. You pry it loose with a fingernail, precious carbohydrates that will thicken a pottage or add a handful of flour to the winter stores. It's the medieval equivalent of finding a forgotten bill in an old coat pocket, a tiny, unexpected blessing. You look across the landscape, a patchwork of immense fields. This is your whole world, organized by a rhythm you were born into. One of the great fields lies fallow this year, its soil resting, slowly regaining its strength. Sheep and cattle from the village graze upon its stubble, their droppings a vital part of the renewal, returning nitrogen to the earth. A second field, the one you're in, just gave up its spring planting of oats and barley. And over there, on the other side of a low stone wall, is the third field. A few weeks ago, it was plowed and planted with winter wheat. You can just make out the faint green haze of the young shoots, a fragile promise of next year's bread. This is the great three-field system in action, a mainstream historical fact of your life, an innovation that keeps the soil from utter exhaustion and, by extension, keeps you from starvation. You stare at those tender green blades and send a silent prayer that the coming snows will be a gentle blanket, not an icy, killing shroud. The church bell tolls from the village, a single, resonant clang that tells you the day is waning. Time to move on. Gleaning is crucial, but it's only one of a dozen frantic tasks. You shoulder your sack, which feels depressingly light, and begin the slow trudge back toward the cluster of low, smoky huts that you call home. Your path takes you past the small plot of land, your toft, that is attached to your dwelling. Here, the work is more personal. You spent the last week digging the last of the tough, pale carrots and the hard, dense turnips. There's no joy in it, not like pulling a sweet, sun-warmed carrot in summer. These are survival vegetables. You found one particularly gnarled carrot that was almost comically bent, and for a moment, you smiled. The medieval version of finding a funny-shaped potato chip, I suppose. A brief, welcome absurdity in a world of relentless toil. Your neighbor, Thomas, is in his yard, a grim look on his face. He's sharpening a long knife on a whetstone, the rhythmic shh sound cutting through the damp air. Beside him, tethered to a post, is a pig. It's a sad sight. You've seen this pig all year, snuffling around the village, growing fat on scraps. But there isn't enough surplus grain to feed it through the winter. Keeping it alive would mean taking food from the mouths of his children. And so, it must be slaughtered. Its death will provide a cask of salted pork and a bladder of precious lard, fuel to last the family through the lean months. You give Thomas a solemn nod. He nods back. Nothing needs to be said. This is the brutal calculus of survival. Another vital task awaits: fuel. You can't just wander into the woods and chop down a tree. The forest belongs to the Lord, every last branch and leaf. To fell a tree is a serious crime, punished by a heavy fine or even a mutilation. But you have rights, ancient rights. You are allowed to gather firewood by hook or by crook, meaning you can take any dead branches you can pull down with a shepherd's crook or find lying on the forest floor. You head to the woods on the edge of the village, a long, hooked pole in your hand. The forest is darker, colder. The wet leaves plaster themselves to your ankles. You scan the canopy, looking for the telltale gray of dead wood. It's a slow, painstaking process. And you're always half listening for the sound of the reeve, the Lord's famously unpleasant overseer, who seems to have a sixth sense for a peasant who's eyeing a branch that's a little too thick, a little too green. Historians still argue whether the single-term peasant truly captures the reality of village life, or if the chasm between a relatively secure villain, who might hold 30 acres of land for the Lord, and a landless cotter with nothing but a hovel and a garden, was as wide as any social gap today. You are somewhere in the muddled middle. You have your hut, your small garden, and a few strips in the common fields. You are not free, you cannot leave the manor without permission, but you are not destitute. The woman gleaning next to you earlier, a widow with no children to support her? Her winter will be far harder than yours. This thought offers no comfort, only a deeper chill. Finally, as true dusk begins to settle, you have a decent bundle of firewood, tied with a bit of scavenged rope. The last task of the day is a small, personal one. Back in your hut, which we will explore in much greater detail later, you sit close to the fledgling fire. Your leather shoes, simple turn shoes made of a single piece of hide stitched up the middle, are soaked through. You carefully prop them near the hearth, close enough to dry but not so close that the leather will crack and shrink. Once they are merely damp, you take a small wooden bowl filled with a greasy, yellowish substance, rendered goose fat. It's a quirky but essential tidbit of peasant life. You scoop up a dollop with your fingers and begin to work it methodically into the leather of your shoes, paying special attention to the seams. The fat makes the leather supple and, more importantly, water-resistant. It won't keep your feet perfectly dry in a downpour, but it will stop the relentless damp from seeping in quite so quickly. You rub the excess on your own chapped hands. Every resource has multiple uses. The light outside is gone now. The world has shrunk to the small, flickering circle of your fire. The smell of wood smoke, damp wool, and the pottage simmering over the flames is the smell of home. You are bone-weary. Every muscle sings with the familiar song of labor. But as you look at the small pile of gleaned grain, the bundle of firewood, and your newly greased shoes, there is a sliver of satisfaction. You have raced the dying of the light for one more day. You have done what you can. The great, cold, hungry darkness of winter is coming. But tonight, at least, you are prepared. You wake to the cold. It's not a gentle chill, but a sharp, predatory cold that has crept into the hut while you slept and settled deep in your bones. The fire, the beating heart of your small world, has faded to a pile of pale gray ash with a stubborn, glowing ember at its core. Before you do anything else, before you even fully register the ache in your back from the straw pallet on the floor, you must tend to it. You shuffle over in the near-total darkness, your bare feet recoiling from the cold, damp earth of the floor. You gently blow on that single ember, a fragile spark of life. You feed it tiny slivers of dry kindling you prepared last night, nursing it, pleading with it. When a small, hesitant flame finally licks upwards, the relief is a physical thing, washing over you in a wave. Only then does your day truly begin. As the fire grows, pushing the gloom back into the corners, you turn your attention from the hearth to the home it sits in. This isn't a task of decoration or cleaning in any modern sense. This is a structural survey, an inspection for weaknesses in your fortress against the coming siege of winter. Your eyes, accustomed to the dim light, scan the walls and the low, soot-blackened ceiling. This hut is your shell, your armor. And right now, it's full of holes. You can feel a draft, a slender, icy finger of air, tracing the line across your cheek from the north wall. The wind outside is picking up, and its mournful howl is a reminder that your flimsy walls are all that stand between your family and the elements. You look up at the skeleton of your home, a masterpiece of simple, rustic engineering. The main frame is built from two enormous, naturally curved timbers, crux, they're called. Each pair was cut from the same tree, sliced down the middle to create a matching set. They rise from the dirt floor in a great, arching A shape, meeting at the ridge of the roof. These massive, smoke-darkened ribs are the only reason this place is still standing. This crux frame construction is a common sight in your village. It's a sturdy, reliable design that has sheltered your ancestors and will likely shelter your descendants. But the frame is only the bones. The flesh is the problem. The walls between the upright timbers are made of wattle and daub. You run a hand over the rough, bumpy surface. The wattle is a lattice of thin, pliable branches, mostly hazel and willow, woven together like a giant, clumsy basket. The daub is the thick, plaster-like coating smeared over this framework to make it solid. Over the dry months of summer, this daub has shrunk and cracked. Time and weather have nibbled away at it, creating a network of fine fissures and outright gaps that now act as tiny highways for the wind. Your mission for the day is to seal them. All of them. You head outside into the gray, blustery morning. First, you need your raw materials. You dig up a barrel load of heavy clay soil from a pit at the edge of your garden plot. Next, you mix in handfuls of chopped straw and, if you can get it, some coarse animal hair from the floor of the shearing shed. These act as binders, the medieval version of fiberglass, to give the mixture strength and stop it from cracking quite so badly as it dries. Finally, you add the most important, if least appealing, ingredient. Into the thick, cold slurry of mud and straw, you pour a bucket of liquid you've been collecting. It's mostly stale, sour beer from the bottom of a barrel, but there's a healthy dose of urine mixed in, too. This isn't some strange, desperate act, it's a quirky but common piece of building knowledge. The ammonia and other compounds in the waste liquid are believed to cure the daub, making it harder and helping to repel insects and other vermin. It's like an artisanal sourdough starter, really. Very organic, locally sourced. And it would definitely cause a modern health inspector to simply burst into flames. The smell is potent. But you're used to it. You roll up the sleeves of your rough woolen tunic and plunge your hands into the freezing, gritty muck, mixing it all together into a thick, uniform paste. Now for the hard part. You scoop up a great handful of the daub and carry it back inside. Starting with that drafty north wall, you begin to systematically press the cold, wet mixture into the cracks. It's miserable work. The daub squeezes between your fingers, cold and abrasive, and the dampness seems to leach the very warmth from your body. You push it deep into the wattle, smoothing it over with the palm of your hand, your movements practiced and efficient. You are not just filling a hole, you are performing a kind of prayer against the cold, a practical magic to keep the wind demons out. Your hut has no real windows. To have a large opening in the wall would be an unthinkable luxury, a permanent invitation to the cold. Instead, you have a couple of small, square holes cut into the walls at about head height. They're called wind eyes, the ancestor of the modern window. They are unglazed, of course. Glass is a treasure for churches and the Lord's Manor. The best you can do is a set of ill-fitting wooden shutters, which you can close at night, or a piece of scraped animal horn, oiled and stretched over the opening. This makes the horn translucent, allowing a murky, yellowish light to filter through, but it does little to stop the cold. Historians still argue about just how dark these homes were. The romantic paintings you'll never see often depict cozy peasant cottages with shafts of sunlight illuminating a tidy domestic scene. You know the truth. The reality is a perpetual twilight. You sacrifice light for warmth, every time. The true sun in your life is the fire on the hearth, not the one in the sky. After an hour of painstaking work, you've sealed the worst of the cracks on the main wall. You stand back to admire your handiwork. The fresh daub is a series of dark, damp patches against the lighter, drier wall. It's ugly, but it's functional. You can no longer feel that persistent draft on your cheek. You've just upgraded your home's energy efficiency rating from open field to passably sheltered. A victory. Next, you turn your attention to the floor. It is simply earth, packed down by years of use. It's perpetually damp, a direct conduit for the chill of the ground beneath. There's not much to be done about that, but you can mitigate it. You will soon go to the river to cut fresh rushes, which you'll lay in a thick, sweet-smelling layer across the floor. This will provide a bit of insulation and absorb the mud, spills, and general filth of daily life. For now, you just stamp down a few loose spots and make a mental note to get the rushes before the first deep freeze makes the riverbank impassable. Finally, the roof. It's a thick thatch of straw, laid over a framework of branches. It's a good roof, over a foot thick in most places, but it's also a perfect home for a thriving community of mice, spiders, and who knows what else. From inside, you squint up at the soot-blackened ceiling, searching for tiny pinpricks of daylight. Each one represents a leak that will drip endlessly once the winter rains and snows arrive. You spot a couple of likely candidates near the smoke hole, the opening directly above the hearth that lets a fraction of the smoke out. You can't fix it properly until the weather clears, but you can make a temporary patch. You grab a handful of loose straw, climb onto a small stool, and stuff the straw up into the gap as tightly as you can. It's another small, necessary defense. Your work for the day is done. The hut smells strongly of damp earth, wet clay, and that faint, sharp tang of ammonia from your special daub mixture. The air is still and heavy. You have deliberately created a sealed, smoky, stuffy box. In a few weeks, this single room will also be home to your most valuable animals, a calf, maybe, or a couple of sheep, brought inside to protect them from the cold and from thieves. It's the original open-plan living concept. The cow is both a roommate and a vital space heater, which, you reflect, is more than you can say for most roommates. The air will become thick with the combined breath of humans and animals, the smell of manure, sweat, and smoke. It will be crowded and profoundly unhygienic. But it will be warmer than the outside. And in the brutal months to come, that is the only metric that matters. You have sealed your world in, and the great, wild world out. With your small hut now sealed against the worst of the wind, the world outside begins to fade. The howling of the wind is more muted, a distant complaint rather than an immediate threat. The air inside is still, heavy, and thick with the smells of smoke, damp earth, and your own unwashed body. In this newly created stillness, a different kind of anxiety begins to surface. It's a quiet, gnawing dread that settles in the pit of your stomach. The cold can be fought with walls and fire, but hunger is an enemy that attacks from within. It's time to take stock. It is time to confront the fragile mathematics of your survival. You begin your inventory not with your eyes, but with your hands and your nose. In the gloom of the hut, sight is a secondary sense. You move to the corner that serves as your pantry. Here, stacked against the daub wall, are the sacks that hold the bulk of your winter calories. You run your hand over the coarse, bumpy burlap of the largest sack. It's barley. You can feel the small, hard grains through the cloth. This is the foundation of everything. It will be ground into rough flour for flatbreads, but mostly, it will be boiled for hours into pottage. Next to it is a slightly smaller sack of oats, for much the same purpose, and a small, precious bag of rye. Rye grows better in poor soil, but it is susceptible to the dreaded ergot fungus, a poison that can bring madness and death, so you treat it with a cautious respect. You untie the top of the barley sack and plunge your arm in deep, feeling the cool, dry cascade of grain against your skin. You are checking for damp, for the musty, cellar-like smell of mold, the silent destroyer of a winter horde. The grain feels dry, and it smells clean and earthy. You breathe a small sigh of relief. You do the same for the sack of dried peas and beans, the peasant's meat, which will provide the protein that actual meat rarely does. Their hard, pebble-like forms are a promise of substance, of a stew that will stick to your ribs for a few hours. This is your wealth. Not gold, not silver, but the sheer, beautiful, life-giving bulk of stored complex carbohydrates. You heft one of the sacks. It's heavy, reassuringly so. But as you stand there, you are already performing the grim calculations. There are 4 of you in the family. There are perhaps 120 days between now and the first hopeful appearance of spring greens. How many handfuls of barley per day? How many for the children? The numbers dance in your head, slippery and uncertain. The pile of sacks seems large now, in the waning days of autumn. You know, from bitter experience, how terrifyingly small it will look by February. Your gaze moves upwards, towards the blackened rafters that span the space above your head. Here hangs the second part of your stockpile, the preserved meats and flavorings. A slab of salted pork, its surface a crusty white, hangs stiff and unmoving. You press a finger against it, it's hard as wood. This is not for regular meals. A tiny sliver of this, sliced off with a knife, will be a rare treat, a burst of salty, fatty flavor in the endless ocean of bland pottage. Next to it hangs a taut, translucent bladder filled with rendered lard. This is liquid gold, a source of pure energy to be doled out by the spoonful when sickness strikes or the cold becomes truly unbearable. Dangling in dusty, fragrant bunches are the herbs you gathered and dried in late summer, woody stems of thyme, sage, and marjoram. They look brittle and lifeless, but they hold the gust of summer's flavor, a way to combat the monotony of the winter diet. And there, in a small clay pot tucked into the rafters to keep it safe from mice, is a chunk of honeycomb, a rare treasure from a wild hive you found in the woods. This is your medicine as much as your sweetener. The centerpiece of your entire food strategy, however, is already cooking. Hanging over the fire on a hook and chain is a large, soot-blackened iron pot. Inside, a thick, grayish gruel bubbles and spits. This is pottage, the single most important historical fact of your culinary life. It is a perpetual stew, a living meal. It's never emptied, merely replenished. This morning, you added a handful of barley and some water. Last night, it was a chopped turnip. It's the ultimate meal prep. You start cooking in October and you're done in April. There are no complex recipes to remember, and the leftovers policy is very straightforward. The taste of the pottage defines the season. Right now, it's still reasonably thick. By late winter, it will be a thin, watery broth, with a few sad, floating grains. You are constantly, quietly hungry. Even now, with a full store, your stomach feels hollow. It's a familiar sensation, a baseline state of being. Historians still argue about the true nutritional reality of your existence. Did your monotonous diet of coarse bread and grain-heavy pottage provide enough calories to fuel the brutal, year-round labor of farming? Or were you and your kin living in a perpetual state of nutritional deficit, a slow-motion starvation that made you smaller, weaker, and more vulnerable to disease with each passing winter? Standing here in your hut, you don't need a historian to tell you the answer. You know that the feeling of being truly full is a rare and celebrated event, reserved for the harvest feast or the 12 days of Christmas. The rest of the time, you are just varying degrees of hungry. In a dark, cool corner of the hut, away from the fire, lies the root cellar, which is really just a pile of vegetables covered with straw. You have your turnips, with their bitter, peppery bite. You have some pale, sweetish parsnips, and a small mound of onions whose pungent aroma is a weapon against blandness. You inspect them carefully, turning them over, feeling for the soft spots that signal the beginning of rot. You discard one turnip that has succumbed, tossing it outside for the pigs. Every single vegetable that rots is a small, painful failure. Beside the vegetable sits a small stone jug, stoppered with a plug of wood and wax. This is one of your secret weapons. It contains verjuice, a substance you made back in August from unripe, wild crab apples. You pull out the stopper and take a cautious sniff. The smell is incredibly acidic, a sharp, green, mouth-puckering aroma. You dip a finger in and taste a single drop. The sourness is so intense it makes your eyes water. This is a classic, if quirky, peasant condiment. A few drops of verjuice can cut through the greasy taste of salted meat, add a desperately needed tang to the pottage, or dress foraged winter greens. It is your vinegar, your lemon juice, your bottle of hot sauce, a little splash of excitement in a world of gray. The winter menu is simple. You will have pottage for your morning meal. You will have pottage for your evening meal. If you are lucky, you will have a chunk of dark, heavy bread to go with it. It's less of a menu and more of a memo, really. But it's not just you who is hungry. As you finish your inventory, you hear it, a faint, frantic scrabbling sound from the thatch above your head. Mice. They are in the walls, in the roof, everywhere. They are a constant threat to your grain sacks, a tiny army of thieves plotting to steal your future. Your cat, a lean, half-wild creature, is your primary defense. She is not a pet to be cuddled, she is a furry security guard who works for room and board and sleeps by the fire. And frankly, judging by the audible scrabbling, her performance review this quarter has been a little disappointing. The war against vermin is one you can never truly win, only fight to a stalemate. Your survey is complete. You have a mental map of your hoard, a fragile inventory of everything that stands between your family and starvation. It is a terrifyingly small amount of food. You secure the lids on your storage bins, check that the salted pork is hanging high and dry, and give the hut a final scan. The food is protected from the damp and, hopefully, from the mice. For now, you have done all you can. Your attention shifts back to the fire, the single source of warmth you possess. The food will keep you alive, but the fire, well, the fire will make life worth living. It is a demanding master, and it will soon become the absolute center of your world. Your inventory is complete, your small hoard of food accounted for. That anxiety, for the moment, recedes into the background, replaced by a more immediate and primal focus. You turn your full attention to the fire. It is a living thing in the center of your hut, a small, captive sun. It crackles and sighs, spitting embers, its flames dancing in shifting shades of orange, yellow, and red. This is not merely a source of heat, it is the absolute center of your universe, the gravitational point around which your entire winter existence will orbit. It is your clock, your kitchen, your television, and your God. And it is a tyrant. The hearth is not a decorative feature tucked into a wall. It is a circle of packed earth and stones set directly in the middle of the floor. This placement is entirely practical. It means the heat radiates outwards in all directions, and that every person in the hut can get some small share of its warmth. The geography of your home is defined by it. The sleeping pallets are arranged in a semicircle around it, with everyone's feet pointing towards the embers for warmth. The single iron pot, your most valuable metal possession, hangs from a hook directly over it. Tools that need to be kept dry, the wooden handle of an axe, a leather strap, are propped up near the stones. When your neighbors visit, you will not gather around a table, but huddle together in the circle of the fire's light and warmth. It dictates every movement, every social interaction. But this God is demanding. Its primary demand is hunger. The fire is always hungry. That bundle of firewood you so painstakingly gathered now seems pitifully small. You look at each log not as a piece of wood, but as a unit of time, an hour of warmth, an evening of light. You cannot afford to burn it recklessly. You become a master of fuel conservation, choosing each piece with care. You learn the personalities of different woods. Oak burns long and hot, ash gives a bright, clean flame, but much of what you have is damp, punky willow that hisses and spits, creating more smoke than heat. And the smoke is the fire's constant, oppressive companion. Your hut, like almost every peasant dwelling, has no chimney. A chimney is an expensive, complicated piece of masonry, a luxury reserved for the Lord's Hall or the stone-built presbytery. You have a simple, open hole in a thatched roof, directly above the hearth. In theory, the smoke rises and exits through this smoke hole, or louver. In practice, only a fraction of it ever finds its way out. The rest, thick and greasy, fills the upper half of the room in a permanent, choking cloud. You learn to live your life slightly stooped, keeping your head below the worst of the haze. It's a very effective system for smoking meat and people. You are, essentially, slow cooking yourself and your family for 3 to 4 months of the year. Your eyes are perpetually red and stinging. You carry a constant, hacking cough that worsens as the winter deepens. You run a finger along one of the crook beams above your head and it comes away coated in a thick, black, greasy layer of soot. Everything you own is impregnated with this smell of stale smoke. It is in your hair, your skin, the rough wool of your tunic. It is the inescapable perfume of winter life. The quality of this smoke, and the heat you get, is a matter of constant concern. You know the good, dry hardwood from the Lord's forest would burn bright and hot, but you are forbidden from taking it. Historians still argue about what an average peasant actually burned in their hearth. While stories speak of the crackling Yule log, the reality for you is often a sad compromise. You burn what you can get, fallen branches, bundles of twigs, gorse, and heather. If you live near a bog, you might burn bricks of dried peat, which gives off a pungent, earthy smoke and a slow, sullen heat. And in the hardest times, some are known to burn dried animal dung, carefully collected and shaped into cakes. You hoard your few decent logs of ash or hazel, saving them for the nights when the cold is so severe it feels like a physical presence, a wolf scratching at the walls. For all its tyranny, for all the smoke and the endless hunger for fuel, the fire gives you one gift that is almost as precious as warmth: light. As the sun sets and the world outside is plunged into a profound and intimidating blackness, the fire pushes back the dark. Its flickering, dancing light is alive. It's not the dead, sterile light of a modern bulb. It makes the shadows leap and writhe, turning a simple wooden stool into a hunched creature and the hanging herbs into skeletal fingers. It's not a great light source for reading, of course, mostly because you are illiterate and own nothing even remotely resembling a book, but for seeing the vague, firelit outline of your child's face, for watching the expressions of your spouse as they tell a story, for the simple act of not being in absolute darkness. It is everything. It is the difference between existence and hibernation. But this pet dragon is always dangerous. The fear of a house fire is a deep and constant one. A stray spark, a log that shifts and rolls from the hearth, is all it takes. If an ember were to land on the dry straw of your bedding, or be carried by the updraft into the dry, mouse-infested thatch of the roof, your entire world could be consumed by flames in minutes. And in a village of tightly packed huts, each with a thatched roof, a fire in one house can easily become an inferno that destroys them all. You are always vigilant, always listening for an unusual crackle, always watching for a spark that flies too far. At the end of the long, wearying day, it is time to put the fire to bed. You cannot simply let it burn out, as coaxing a new flame from flint and steel in a damp, cold hut is a frustrating, time-consuming task. You must preserve the embers. For this, you have a special piece of technology, a quirky but vital tool, the couvre-feu, the fire cover. The English word curfew comes directly from this object and this practice. Yours is a heavy, dome-shaped piece of thick pottery, like a giant, handleless bowl. With a stick, you carefully push all the glowing embers of the fire into a tight, compact mound in the center of the hearth. Then, you lift the heavy curfew and place it carefully over the pile, pressing it down into the ash. The cover serves two purposes. First, it contains the fire, preventing any sparks from escaping during the night and burning your house down while you sleep. Second, it restricts the oxygen, slowing the rate of combustion to a bare minimum. The embers will not die, but smolder gently, sleeping under their ceramic blanket. In the morning, you will lift the cover to find a heart of glowing warmth, ready to be revived with a puff of air and some dry tinder. It's a simple, ingenious device. It's basically a do not disturb sign for your fire, and it's the single most important piece of smart home technology you own. With the curfew in place, the change is immediate and dramatic. The flickering light is gone, plunging the hut into a profound, almost liquid darkness. The radiant warmth, which had been pushing back the cold, vanishes. The chill you'd kept at bay all evening begins to creep back in from the walls, from the damp floor. The god is asleep. The tyranny has passed. Now begins the long, cold, and truly dark part of the night, a time for huddling under skins and straw, listening to the wind, and waiting for the dawn when you can, once again, awaken your demanding, smoky, beautiful master. The curfew is placed. The fire god is asleep under its clay dome. The light and warmth, which had pushed the world out to the edges of your hut, now collapse into nothing. The darkness that floods the space is absolute, a physical presence. It is so total you feel you could scoop it up in your hands. The cold, which had been waiting patiently at the walls, immediately begins its silent, creeping invasion. This is the beginning of the long, dark night. In the height of summer, the night is a brief, welcome respite. In the dead of winter, it is an ocean of time, 16 hours of blackness that must be crossed, night after night. You lie down on your sleeping pallet, a simple sack stuffed with straw that rustles and crackles with every movement. It does little to cushion you from the hard, cold earth beneath. You pull a rough woolen blanket and a sheepskin over yourself and the children huddled next to you. In the modern world, the night is a suggestion, a thing to be curtailed with the flick of a switch, to be filled with light and endless distraction. For you, the night is a reality as solid and inescapable as a stone wall. Your senses realign. Sight is useless, so your world is rebuilt from sound and touch. You listen. The wind, your constant companion, moans around the corners of the hut, a low, mournful sound. It's a reminder of the vast, cold emptiness that lies just on the other side of your flimsy wall of wattle and daub. The cruck frame of the house groans and creaks as the timbers contract in the cold, like an old man settling his bones. From the thatch above, you hear the faint, frantic scrabbling of mice, a sound that sends a flicker of irritation and anxiety through you. Beside you, you hear the soft, rhythmic breathing of your spouse, the puffing snores of a child deep in dreams. A dog barks somewhere in the village, a lonely, echoing sound that only emphasizes the silence. These are the landmarks in the immense, black landscape of the night. You don't expect to sleep for 8 uninterrupted hours. That is not the shape of sleep you know. Your life is governed by the sun, not by a clock, and your sleep follows a more ancient, broken rhythm. You fall quickly into your first sleep, a heavy, leaden slumber born of pure physical exhaustion. Your body craves this oblivion, a brief death to mend the aches and strains of a day spent toiling. Then, perhaps 3 or 4 hours later, you wake up. It is not a gentle stirring, you are suddenly, fully awake. The hut is still profoundly dark, and the cold is now so deep it feels sharp. This is the waking watch, a strange and quiet interlude in the middle of the night. This is a mainstream historical fact of your time, a pattern of segmented sleep that was the norm for centuries. In this still, suspended hour, the world belongs to you. What do you do at this time? Sometimes, you pray. You lie on your back, staring up into a blackness you cannot pierce, and whisper the few prayers you know by heart, the words a comforting, rhythmic murmur in the silence. It is a time for quiet conversation with your spouse. Your voice is low so as not to wake the children. You speak of practical things, the sick you, the dwindling supply of rye flour, a rumor of a new tax from the manor. It is also a time for marital intimacy, cocooned in the deep privacy that only the heart of a winter night can provide. Mostly, though, you think. Your mind, freed from the endless demands of daytime labor, is free to roam. And here lies a great mystery. Historians still argue about what truly occupied the minds of people like you in these long, dark, silent hours. The priest, in his sermons, urges you to meditate upon the state of your soul, to contemplate your sins, and to pray for salvation. And sometimes, you do. You think of hell, a place of fire, and wonder if it could possibly be worse than a place of endless ice. But more often, your thoughts are stubbornly, persistently earthbound. You find yourself replaying a petty squabble with your neighbor over a stray chicken. You feel a hot surge of resentment towards the reeve, whose smug face as he collected the Lord's portion of your grain is seared into your memory. Your mind drifts to the taste of the strong ale at the last harvest festival, a warm, happy memory you turn over and over like a smooth stone. It's the original 3 a.m. doom scroll, just without the glowing screen. You simply scroll through your own catalog of anxieties, petty triumphs, and simmering resentments. It's a surprisingly rich, if not always pleasant, form of entertainment. Occasionally, a sound or a need requires light. A child coughs, a racking, persistent cough that worries you. You need to see them, to give them a sip of water. For this, you might resort to a rushlight. You prepared them weeks ago, a task for a slow afternoon. You took the long stems of the rush plant, peeled away the outer skin to reveal the spongy inner pith, and then soaked that pith in leftover bacon grease or mutton fat. Now, you fumble in the dark for one of these stiff, greasy tapers and your flint and steel. Getting a spark to catch on a piece of dry char cloth is a delicate business in the freezing dark. When it finally catches, you use it to light the tip of the rushlight. It sputters to life with a foul smell of burning, rancid fat. The light is pathetic. It's a tiny, smoky, yellow flame that flickers wildly, casting huge, distorted shadows that writhe and dance on the walls. It provides just enough light to see how truly dark it is. It's the kind of mood lighting that doesn't create a mood so much as a vague sense of unease and an imminent fire hazard. But it allows you to see your child's face, to feel their forehead for fever. It is a tiny, smelly victory against the darkness. After a few minutes, you extinguish it, pinching the flame between your calloused, damp fingers, and the oppressive blackness slams back into place. The darkness is not just an absence of light, it is full of menace. Every creak of the hut, every skittering sound from the roof, every gust of wind can momentarily become something else. A fox trying to get at your precious chickens? A wolf, driven by hunger from the deep woods? Or something worse? The priest's stories of demons and lost souls who wander the night, seeking to torment good Christians, feel much more plausible now than they do in the bright light of day. The thin walls of your hut feel less like a fortress and more like a fragile membrane against the unknown. After an hour or so, the waking watch comes to an end. A different kind of weariness settles over you. Having confronted your anxieties in the profound darkness, you crave the escape of sleep once more. You adjust the scratchy blanket, huddling closer to the warmth of your family. Sharing a single, large straw pallet is essential for warmth. For personal space, privacy, and hygiene, the reviews are, shall we say, slightly more mixed. You curl into a tight ball, tucking your hands into your armpits for warmth, and allow yourself to drift away. This is the second sleep. It is often lighter, filled with strange dreams, but it is a necessary crossing to the shores of morning. You surrender to it, letting the sounds of the night, the wind, the mice, the breathing, fade into a distant murmur. You are adrift in the great, cold, silent ocean of a medieval winter night. But somewhere, far away, the sun is beginning its long journey back to your sliver of the world. And your second sleep is a bridge to that eventual, blessed dawn. Section 6. The second sleep releases you not into a bright morning, but into a world of gray. A thin, Weak light filters through the smoke hole on the tiny, shuttered wind eyes, doing little to dispel the gloom within the hut. The cold is a solid, physical presence. Your first act, as always, is to awaken the fire. You lift the heavy curfew, and the sight of the glowing embers within is a small miracle, a promise of warmth. You coax it back to life, and as the flames grow, the day's rhythm begins. The pottage pot is hung over the flames, and the smell of simmering barley and smoke once again becomes the air you breathe. Outside, the world is often hostile. The ground is frozen solid, or it's a sea of half-frozen mud. A bitter wind might be scouring the landscape, or a fine, icy rain might be falling. The great outdoor work of the agricultural year is paused, sleeping under a blanket of frost. This leaves you with a strange and challenging new resource: time, hours upon hours of daylight, short though the days may be, that must be filled. The priest's sermons warn that idle hands do the devil's work. For you, the concern is more practical. Idle hands in winter mean a broken plow in spring, threadbare clothes for your children, and a slow descent into unpreparedness. Idleness is not rest, it is a dangerous void that must be filled with productive, indoor labor. Your small, smoky hut transforms into a workshop, a miniature factory powered by familial obligation. The division of labor is as old and ingrained as the cruck frame of your house. It is a mainstream historical fact of your life that winter work is sharply divided by gender. You and your sons have your tasks, your wife and daughters have theirs. You, as the man of the house, turn to the things made of wood and leather. You retrieve the heavy wooden yoke used for the oxen. You noticed a hairline crack in it during the autumn plowing, and to leave it would be to risk it snapping under strain in the spring. You spend the better part of the morning carefully examining it, scraping it clean, and deciding on a repair. You take a strip of untanned leather, soak it in water until it's pliable, and then stretch it tightly around the crack, binding it with cord. As the leather dries in the relative warmth of the hut, it will shrink, tightening its grip on the wood, creating a strong, durable splint. Later, you might sit on a low stool by the fire, a block of ashwood between your knees, and begin to carve. You are not crafting artisanal furniture, there is no flourish, no artistry for its own sake. You are making what is needed. A new handle for a shovel, shaped to fit your grip. A set of simple wooden pegs that will be used to pin a mortise joint in a new gate. A rough, serviceable spoon for the pottage pot. The work is slow, your hands stiff with cold. The knife is your most versatile tool, and you use it with a practiced, patient skill, the rhythmic scraping and shaving of wood a quiet counterpoint to the hiss of the fire. You're not trying to make it perfect. The primary goal is less wobbly than it was yesterday. It's the medieval equivalent of spending an entire Saturday on a single IKEA flat pack, but with more splinters and a much higher chance of it actually being useful. Meanwhile, on the other side of the hearth, your wife is immersed in the world of textiles. Her work begins with a large, lumpy bag of raw wool, shorn from your sheep back in the spring. It is greasy with lanolin, dirty, and tangled. Her first task is to card it. She takes a handful of the fleece and places it between two wooden paddles, known as cards, whose faces are covered with fine metal teeth. With a rhythmic scraping motion, she combs the wool between the two cards, over and over again. The process teases apart the knots and aligns the fibers, transforming the lumpy mess into a soft, airy roll of wool called a roll-log. The air fills with the dusty, animal smell of the fleece. Once she has a pile of these fluffy roll-lags, the true magic begins. She takes one and teases out the end, attaching it to her drop spindle. The spindle is a simple tool, a weighted disc, or whirl, on a short stick. With a deft flick of her wrist, she sets it spinning, and it hangs in the air, whirling like a top. As it spins, it twists the woolen fibers, drawing them out from the roll-log into a long, continuous thread of yarn. Her hands are never still, feeding the fibers, controlling the tension, ensuring the yarn is of a consistent thickness. It is a skill of immense dexterity, learned over a lifetime, and the gentle, hypnotic whir of the spindle is one of the defining sounds of winter. On a particularly dim, overcast day, the gray light from outside is not enough. The fine work of sharpening a blade or spinning a consistent thread becomes impossible. It is on these days you might resort to making and using your own artificial light. Beeswax candles are a luxury you can only dream of, their sweet smell and bright light reserved for the church altar and the Lord's table. Your light comes from tallow. It's a quirky and unpleasant tidbit of your life that you are your own candle maker. You take the hard, rendered fat from a sheep or cow and melt it down in a pot, a process that fills the hut with a nauseating, greasy stench. You then take a dried rush or a length of twisted flax and repeatedly dip it into the hot, liquid tallow, allowing each layer to cool and harden. The result is a lumpy, irregular, greasy candle. When you light it, it does not burn with a clean, steady flame. It sputters and spits, the flame guttering and flickering. It produces a thick, black smoke and a truly awful smell of hot, burning fat. The light it gives is dim and unreliable. It's so unpleasant that it makes the cat, normally unbothered by anything short of physical danger, get up and move to the other side of the hut. It is less hygge, that modern concept of cozy contentment, and more gag reflex. But it is light. It allows work to continue. It is a necessary evil. This endless, quiet work raises a question. Historians still argue about whether winter was a time of rest and leisure for the peasantry, a welcome break from the back-breaking toil of the agricultural calendar. From your perspective, sitting in the smoky gloom, the concept of leisure seems like a fantasy. The work is different, it's true. It is less demanding on the large muscles of your back and legs. But it is relentless. The pressure to produce is just as strong. Every inch of yarn your wife spins is an inch of cloth that will keep a child warm. Every tool you repair is a disaster averted in the planting season. This is not a hobby. This is the quiet, essential, and unending work of survival. There is no downtime in a year where the only goal is to make it to the next. The final products of this labor are humble. The woolen cloth your wife might eventually weave on a small, upright loom is thick, durable, and warm. It is also incredibly scratchy, and it comes in one fashionable color, vaguely sheep-colored brown. But it will be made into tunics and leggings that keep out the biting wind, and that is the only fashion that truly matters. Your carved spoon will not win any awards for craftsmanship, but it will carry pottage from the pot to your mouth. Utility is the only beauty you have time for. As the weak afternoon light finally begins to fade, you put down your tools. The day of indoor work is over. A small pile of wood shavings lies by your stoolie. A neat row of newly spun yarn balls sits in a basket by the wall. It's a tangible result, a small victory against the entropy of the season. You have not been idle. You have wrestled a day's worth of use and preparedness from the jaws of the long, dark winter. The day's quiet labors are done. The gray light has failed completely, and the evening meal of pottage has been eaten, leaving a brief, fragile sense of fullness in your belly. Now, as you sit by the fire, you can feel the true cold of the night beginning to press in on your small hut. The new daub on the walls and the thick thatch overhead do their best, but this is a deep, invasive cold that seems to radiate from the very earth itself. It is time for the final, crucial chore of the day. It is time to bring in the heaters. You rise and lift the heavy wooden bar that secures your door. A blast of frigid air rushes in, making the fire dance wildly and sending a shiver through everyone in the hut. Peering out into the pitch black, you call out softly. From a crude lean-to attached to the side of the hut, you hear a low noise in response. You lead your most valuable possessions into your home, one by one. First comes the family's only cow, her hips wide as she navigates the narrow doorway. Then comes a pregnant ewe, her sides swollen, who you hope will deliver a healthy lamb before the winter is out. This isn't a whole herd, it's your core breeding stock, your living capital, far too precious to be left outside. There are two very simple reasons for this nightly ritual. The first is security. In the long, dark nights of winter, a wolf, driven by hunger from the forest, would make short work of a tethered sheep. But wolves are not the only predators. A desperate or malicious neighbor could just as easily steal an animal under the cover of darkness. Your cow represents years of careful husbandry, the key to your plowing power and a source of milk for your children. To lose her would be a catastrophe, plunging your family from subsistence to destitution. Inside the hut, she is as safe as you can make her. The second reason is warmth. A full-grown cow is a living furnace. Her complex digestive system and massive body generate a tremendous amount of heat. In the sealed, insulated environment of your hut, that animal heat is a significant energy source. Bringing her inside can raise the ambient temperature by several degrees, an enormous difference on a night when the world outside is frozen solid. She is a furry, four-legged radiator, and her presence makes the difference between a night spent shivering uncontrollably and one of tolerable cold. In grander farmsteads, the house might be a proper longhouse, with a dedicated section, called a byre, for the animals at one end. Often, the floor of the byre is slightly lower than the human living space, with a channel to help drain away the waste. But your home is a simple, one-room crock hut. The division between human and animal space is far more conceptual. Historians still argue about how formally this space was divided in the homes of the poor. Was there always a partition, a low wattle fence to mark the boundary, or was the reality a more chaotic jumble of people and beasts sharing the same floor? You look at your own arrangement and know the answer. You lead the cow to her designated corner, a space covered with a thick bedding of straw and dried bracken. But her tail is only a few feet from where your children are bundled in their own straw pallet. The separation is a polite fiction, a matter of a few yards of packed earth. You are, for all intents and purposes, sharing a bedroom with your livestock. The atmosphere inside the hut changes instantly and profoundly. The sensory inputs are overwhelming. First, the smell. The sweet, clean scent of the fresh hay you've laid down is quickly joined by the warm, earthy, animal smell of the cow herself, the oily tang of the ewe's wool, and then, inevitably, the sharp, ammoniac odor of manure and fresh urine. This new bouquet mingles with the ever-present aroma of wood smoke to create a potent, complex perfume that is the signature scent of a peasant's winter. Then come the sounds. The relative quiet is replaced by a new, living soundtrack. You hear the cow's rhythmic, meditative grinding as she chews her cud. A soft, low moo rumbles through the small space. The ewe bleats gently. There is the heavy stamp of a hoof, the rustle and sigh of a large body settling comfortably into the straw. The hut is no longer just a shelter, it is an ark, filled with the gentle, constant noises of life. Your bovine roommate is the ideal houseguest in many ways. She provides her own warmth, doesn't interrupt your stories, and contributes to the household simply by existing. Her standards of hygiene are, admittedly, a little lax, but you can't have everything. You stand near the cow for a moment, resting a hand on her flank. The heat radiating from her is a profound comfort, a deep, steady warmth that feels entirely different from the fierce, flickering heat of the fire. In the frigid air of the hut, you can see the breath of the animals pluming in thick, white clouds. It's a quirky folk belief, perhaps, but you use the animals as a gauge for the air quality inside. You watch them. If they are breathing easily, not coughing or agitated, you assume the smoke from the fire isn't too dangerously thick. Their moist exhalations fill the room, a warm, living fog that makes the air heavy and damp. The air is now approximately 50% smoke, 30% cow breath, and 20% organic mystery. You wouldn't bottle it and sell it as a high-end fragrance, but it's warmer than the air outside, so it is the air you want. Of course, the arrangement is not without its significant downsides. The packed earth floor, already difficult to keep clean, now becomes a repository for animal waste. Each morning, scooping out the soiled straw and adding it to the precious manure pile outside is a crucial, if unpleasant, chore. The risk of disease is also a constant, unspoken fear. You have no knowledge of germ theory, but you know that sickness can sometimes pass from animals to people. And the space, your already cramped, tiny hut, has now become almost impossibly crowded. You learn to move carefully, to navigate around the massive, sleeping bulk in the corner. You learn very quickly where to step, and where not to, when you have to get up in the middle of the night. It adds a certain high-stakes element of surprise to your nocturnal wanderings. But these are the costs, and the benefits are worth it. The final chores are done. The door is barred. The world is sealed out once more. You settle down on your own pallet, pulling the scratchy blankets high. You are cocooned now, not just with your family, but with your most vital assets. The hut is a single, breathing entity, a huddle of warm bodies against the vast, indifferent cold. The last sound you hear as you drift into your first sleep is the soft, rhythmic grinding of the cow's jaw, a sound as comforting and steady as a lullaby. You are safe, you are warm, and you are not alone. In the deepest part of the night, during the still, cold hours of the waking watch, the rhythm of the hut is broken. It is not the wind, nor the creak of the house, nor the gentle chewing of the cow. It is a sound that slices through the darkness and finds your ear with terrifying precision, a cough. It is not a simple clearing of the throat. It is a deep, wet, racking cough coming from the small bundle sleeping beside you. It is the sound of your child's lungs, struggling against a tide of sickness. You are fully, instantly awake, and a cold dread, colder than any winter wind, washes over you. You move quickly, fumbling in the blackness to touch your child's forehead. It is hot. Burning hot. The skin is dry and feverish. In the faint, residual warmth of the banked fire, you can hear their breathing, shallow and rapid, punctuated by another gut-wrenching cough that seems to shake their small frame. In a world of modern medicine, this would be a worry, a cause for a visit to the doctor. In your world, it is a crisis of the highest order. There are no clinics, no antibiotics, no sterile rooms. There is only this smoky, crowded hut, and the flimsy barrier of your own knowledge against a foe that claims the very young and the very old with terrifying regularity. A simple chest sickness is a battle for life itself. Your understanding of this illness is not one of germs or viruses, such concepts are centuries away. Your world is governed by the idea of balance. Following the wisdom passed down for generations, a version of the learned theory of the four humors, you see this sickness as an imbalance. The body is filled with an excess of cold, wet phlegm, a corrupting humor that has settled in the chest. Therefore, the cure must be to restore balance. You must fight the cold sickness with heat, you must fight the wetness with dryness, and you must help the body expel the sickness from the lungs. This simple, ancient framework will guide your every action through the long, anxious night. Your first line of defense hangs from the rafters. The hut is not just a home, it is also a pharmacy. You carefully light a stinking tallow candle or a rushlight, its feeble, flickering light pushing back the gloom just enough. You scan the bunches of dried herbs, their dusty, brittle forms holding the last remnants of summer's power. You choose your weapons. A handful of dried horehound, a famously bitter herb known to break up chest complaints. A sprig of thyme, which you believe has a warming, drying effect. You put these in the iron pot with a little water and hang it over the fire, which you've coaxed back to a low flame. The hut fills with the sharp, pungent, medicinal smell of the brewing infusion. When it is ready, you strain the dark, bitter liquid into a wooden cup. Getting your child to drink it is a struggle. The taste is foul, and they are weak and listless. But you persist, forcing small sips between coughing fits. You also have a small pot of a precious concoction made from baked onions and honey. The sweetness makes it more palatable, and you know the honey soothes the throat. You offer this by the spoonful, a small prayer attached to every drop. As the night wears on and the coughing does not subside, you move to your stronger medicines. You have a small, greasy pot containing a poultice, a recipe from the village wise woman. It's a quirky and potent mixture of lanolin, the thick grease from sheep's wool, and the pounded, grated root of the white bryony plant. You know that bryony root is a poison if eaten, a fact that makes you handle it with fearful respect. But applied to the skin, it is a powerful irritant. You smear the foul-smelling, greenish paste onto a square of old linen. The logic, as you understand it, is that the poultice will create heat on the surface of the chest, and this external heat will draw the cold, wet sickness out from the lungs. The theory is that the sickness inside the body will be so alarmed and offended by the smell and fury on the outside that it will simply flee. It's as good a theory as any you have. You gently place the warm, greasy cloth on your child's chest. Within minutes, the skin beneath turns red and hot. To you, this is a sign that the remedy is working, that the battle has been joined. It is an act of desperation, a piece of folk magic as much as medicine, a gamble on a poison's power to heal. You sit there in the near darkness, watching, listening. And you cannot escape the brutal irony of your situation. You are fighting a sickness of the lungs inside a sealed box filled with lung-irritating smoke. You are trying to combat a fever in a crowded space where the breath of other sleepers, human and animal, makes the air thick and heavy. To open the door for fresh air would be to invite the killing cold, which would be even more dangerous for the feverish child. It is an impossible, suffocating choice. In the depths of your helplessness, your mind turns to every possible source of aid. Historians still argue about the true hierarchy of healing for a medieval peasant. Did you turn first to the Christian God, or to the older, unwritten traditions of folk magic? As you watch your child struggle for breath, you know the answer. You turn to everything at once. You whisper every prayer you know, begging the Virgin Mary for mercy and Saint Blaise, the patron of throat ailments, for his intervention. You promise a pilgrimage, a day of fasting, anything. But in the next breath, you murmur the half-pagan charm the wise woman taught you, a string of rhyming words meant to be said as you apply the poultice. For you, there is no conflict. God is the ultimate authority, but the saints are busy, and the herbs of the earth have their own power, their own spirits. You are hedging your bets, making appeals on every front. A little prayer for the soul, a little smelly root for the body. It's a holistic approach, covering all the spiritual and agricultural bases. You know that you are not entirely alone. Sickness is a communal affair. Come morning, the news will travel. A neighbor will appear at the door with a small piece of precious honeycomb. The wise woman herself may come, her ancient face a mask of concern, to offer a more potent remedy or simply her opinion. But this shared experience is also a shared fear. A sickness that starts in one hut can easily spread, becoming an epidemic that sweeps through the village, leaving a trail of grief. The night watch is long. You doze in fits, jerking awake at every cough. The hut, which just hours before was a sanctuary of warmth and life, now feels like a prison, a sealed sick room where the air is thick with fear. There is nothing more to be done. You have deployed your full arsenal of herbs, prayers, and charms. Now, you can only wait, and listen to the rattling breaths of your child, and hope that their own small flame of life is strong enough to burn through the fever and greet the dawn. The weeks after the fever broke pass in a gray, monotonous rhythm of indoor work. Your child, though still pale and thin, is healing, a quiet, private miracle that leaves a deep, abiding sense of relief in its wake. The daily fears of sickness recede, replaced by the familiar, dull ache of hunger and cold. But as the days shorten to their absolute nadir, when the sun is just a brief, apologetic smear across the southern sky, a new feeling begins to ripple through the village. It is a subtle shift, a current of anticipation that cuts through the gloom. The great darkness is about to be challenged. The holy days of midwinter, the 12 days of Christmas, are approaching. This is not the frantic, commercial build-up of a future age. There is no shopping, no cascade of gifts. This is an anticipation rooted in something far more fundamental: rest. For 12 holy days, from the Mass of Christ's birth until the Feast of Epiphany, the Church and the Manor declare a cessation of all but the most essential work. The reeve cannot demand service. The millstone will fall silent. The axe will be laid down. It is a sacred pause, a collective breath held in the very lungs of winter. In preparation, the work inside the hut takes on a new, more joyful purpose. Your wife, using a precious portion of the wheat flour you owe the Lord, prepares to bake a special Christmas loaf, richer and whiter than any bread you've tasted since the harvest feast. You and your eldest son venture into the Lord's woods, with permission, this time, to find a suitable Yule log. You choose a massive length of ash, so heavy it takes all your strength to drag it back to the hut. This log is not just fuel, it is a symbol. It will be the heart of your hearth for the entire festival, its slow, steady burning a bulwark against the darkness outside. On Christmas Eve, as a deep and profound darkness settles, the village comes alive. You and your family, wearing your cleanest, best mended tunics, join the procession walking towards the church. The air is so cold it hurts to breathe, and the frozen ground crunches under your thin leather shoes. But you are walking together. You see the faces of your neighbors, lit by the flickering orange light of the occasional torch, and there are smiles, nods, a shared sense of purpose. Inside the stone church, the air is shockingly cold, colder even than your hut, as the stone walls seem to hold a permanent chill. But the smell is transformative. It is not the familiar scent of wood smoke, animals, and damp earth. It is the sacred, otherworldly aroma of melting beeswax from the dozens of candles illuminating the altar, and the sweet, spicy scent of incense smoke hanging in the air. The priest, in his finest embroidered vestments, stands before the altar, a figure of dazzling importance. He begins the Mass, his voice chanting the Latin words that you do not understand but whose cadence is as familiar and comforting as a lullaby. You kneel on the cold stone floor, not as a solitary peasant, but as a part of a congregation, a village, a Christian whole, all staring at the impossible, beautiful light of the candles. As you look around, you see that the church has been decorated with branches of holly, ivy, and other evergreens. And you think of the great Yule log waiting back in your hearth. A thought, old and deep, surfaces. Historians still argue about how much of this winter festival is truly Christian and how much is a stubborn, unacknowledged remnant of far older, pagan traditions. The priest speaks of the birth of the Son of God, a miracle of light in the darkness. But the evergreens, symbols of life in the dead of winter, the great fire, a defiance of the cold, the feasting, a plea for future abundance, all these things feel connected to an ancient magic, to the Yuletide celebration of the winter solstice, the moment the sun dies and is reborn. You feel no conflict in this. In your heart, the birth of the sun and the rebirth of the sun have merged into one great, holy festival of hope against the endless night. The days that follow are a blur of simple joys. You do not work. You sleep late. You visit your neighbors, and they visit you, sharing a cup of thin ale and a bit of gossip. The lord of the manor, as is tradition, shows his festive generosity. He holds a great feast in his hall for all his tenants. You sit at a long trestle table in the vast, firelit, noisy hall, a place you only ever enter on such occasions. The food is a shock to the system. You are served roasted meat, not the stringy, heavily salted pork of your winter stores, but fresh killed beef, dripping with fat. The bread is soft and white. The ale is strong and plentiful. You eat more in a single sitting than you might in 3 days of normal life. It's a bold strategy for your digestive system, which has been operating on a very lean budget for months. You fully expect it to file a formal complaint in the morning. At the height of the feast, the Lord might allow the cherished tradition of the Lord of Misrule. A villager, known for his quick wit, is crowned with a wreath of holly and declared the master of the feast. He sits in the Lord's own chair and, for a few glorious hours, the world is turned upside down. He issues mock decrees, poking fun at the powerful. He might order the famously stern reeve to hop on one foot while reciting a silly poem. He might demand the priest prove he can finish a tankard of ale in one go. The hall erupts in gales of laughter, a sound that is itself a kind of feast. Seeing the reeve looking flustered and foolish does more for village morale than 100 sermons on the virtue of obedience. It is a memory you will hoard, a small, warm colt to be treasured in the cold months ahead. But the 12 days, which at first seemed to stretch on forever, pass quickly. The Yule log burns down to a pile of ash. The last of the Christmas ale is drained. The final piece of the special bread is eaten. And then, on the 13th morning, it is over. The holiday ends as abruptly as it began. The world outside seems darker, the air colder. The reeve is no longer a figure of fun but a harbinger of work to be resumed. And you are back to your familiar diet. The contrast is a physical pain. You stare into your pot of pottage, the same bubbling grey gruel as before, but now it seems utterly, hopelessly bland. Your stomach, having been briefly introduced to the concept of roasted meat and strong ale, now rebels. It's like taking a Roman emperor to a 7-course banquet and then informing him it's back to boiled grain for the rest of his life. There is a period of mournful adjustment. Worse, you look at your winter stockpile, the sacks of grain, the slab of salted meat, and you see with clarity that it is noticeably smaller than it was 2 weeks ago. The feast has come at a high price. The joy of midwinter has faded, leaving behind only the memory of light and the stark reality of the months to come. The festival was a beautiful, necessary dream of abundance. It has given you the strength and hope to face the hardest, hungriest part of the winter, the long, bleak stretch of January and February that still lies ahead. But as you eat your thin pottage, the familiar chill of anxiety returns, sharper and more insistent for its brief, festive absence. The brief, bright memory of the Christmas feast has faded, leaving a hollow echo. The world has returned to its normal state, cold, gray, and demanding. The great Yule log is now nothing but a pile of fine white ash at the back of the hearth. Your small, carefully gathered stack of firewood, which seemed adequate in November, is now alarmingly low. The fire, your household god, is insatiable. Its constant hunger dictates your actions. There is no more putting it off. Despite the brutal cold and the deceptive safety of your sealed hut, you must venture out. You must feed the fire. Preparing for an expedition into the deep winter landscape is a ritual in itself. It's not a matter of simply throwing on a coat. You begin by layering every piece of clothing you own. A linen undertunic, yellowed with age and smoke. Over that, 2 of your scratchy woolen tunics. You pull on thick woolen leggings, patched at the knees, and wrap your lower legs and feet in long strips of cloth, a practice called cross-gartering, to provide another thin layer of insulation and keep snow out of your shoes. Your outerwear has an effective insulation rating of damp sheet. It's not designed to keep you warm, so much as to postpone the inevitable moment when the cold finally wins. Finally, you pull on your leather-turned shoes, the ones you so carefully waterproofed with goose fat weeks ago, hoping they hold up to the challenge. Before you unbar the door, you glance down at your feet. The world outside is coated in a treacherous sheet of ice from a thaw and refreeze a few days ago. To walk on it is to court disaster. You retrieve your ice walkers, a quirky but essential piece of winter technology. They are little more than lengths of thick, knotted rope that you tie around your shoes, creating a crude version of crampons. It's a simple invention, born of necessity, but it can be the difference between a safe return and a fatal fall. You take a deep breath, lift the bar, and pull the door inwards. The transition is a physical shock. The air inside your hut was thick, warm, and humid with the breath of people and animals. The air outside is thin, crystalline, and so ferociously cold that it feels like breathing in needles. It stings your eyes, making them water instantly, and freezes the moisture in your nostrils. The world is unnervingly silent and still, rendered in shades of white and gray. The sky is a low, oppressive sheet of metal. The only sound is the impossibly loud crunch of your own footsteps on the frozen ground. Your destination is the woods at the edge of the village. The journey is slow and perilous. You keep your eyes on the ground, picking your path carefully. A slip here, on the hard, unforgiving ice, could easily mean a broken leg or a shattered hip. And a broken bone in winter, with no chance of proper medical care, is often a slow, agonizing death sentence. The emergency response team is you, trying to get up again. Their estimated time of arrival is whenever you stop feeling sorry for yourself. When you finally reach the tree line, you are already tired, the cold having sapped much of your strength. The woods are even quieter, the snow damping all sound. Here, you are bound by the ancient laws of the manor. You are a peasant with rights to by hook or by crook, meaning you can only take fallen dead wood or branches you can pull down with a hook. The temptation to use the small hand axe tucked in your belt on a low-hanging, living branch is immense. Green wood holds more heat and burns longer. But the Lord's forester, a man whose disposition is as grim as the winter landscape, makes his patrols. The risk of a heavy fine, or worse, is too great. You begin the painstaking work of searching for illegal fuel. It's miserable labor. The branches are frozen to the ground, and you have to kick them free. Your woolen mittens are soon soaked through from handling the snow-covered wood, and your fingers become numb, clumsy claws. Every branch you find and add to your growing pile feels like a small victory. You see a perfectly sized, dry-looking bough just a little too high in a tree to reach with your crook. You briefly consider trying to climb the icy trunk, but then you remember your comprehensive health care plan consists of a neighbor with some smelly herbs and a few Hail Marys. You decide to look for a shorter branch. Across a small clearing, you spot another villager, Thomas, engaged in the same task. You lock eyes for a moment. Is he a comrade in this shared struggle, or a competitor for the same scarce resources? Historians still argue about the true nature of community in these desperate months. Did the extreme hardship foster unbreakable bonds of mutual support, with neighbors sharing their last log? Or did the brutal calculus of survival turn every family into an island, hoarding its fuel and food, viewing others with suspicion? You give Thomas a curt, exhausted nod. He nods back. Today, you are allies. But you know in your heart that if your own fire was dead and your children were freezing, the laws of God and man might begin to feel very distant. The journey home is the worst part of the expedition. The heavy, awkward bundle of wood, tied with a rope, digs into your shoulders and back. It throws you off balance on the treacherous ice. You are sweating now from the exertion, a dangerous development. The sweat soaks into your woolen clothes and the icy wind immediately begins to chill it, leaching the warmth from your body more effectively than the cold alone. Your world shrinks to the singular goal of putting one foot in front of the other. You fix your eyes on the thin, gray plume of smoke rising from your hut. It is your lighthouse in a sea of white, the one sign of life and warmth in the frozen world. You finally stumble through your own door, dropping the bundle of wood with a loud clatter on the floor. The wave of warmth and the familiar, potent smells of smoke, animals, and humanity wash over you. The relief is so profound it almost makes you buckle at the knees. You are home. You are safe. You are exhausted to the bone, your muscles screaming, your fingers and toes numb and aching, but you have done it. You have wrestled another day or two of life from the grip of winter. You have fed the tyrant on your hearth. You slump down near the fire, extending your frozen hands to the flames, and let the outside world, with all its beautiful, deadly emptiness, fade away once more. The firewood you gathered provides a temporary reprieve, a few days where the fear of a dying hearth recedes. But the world outside has doubled down on its fury. A blizzard has descended, a swirling chaos of wind and snow that erases the landscape and makes travel not just perilous, but impossible. You are sealed in your hut, a prisoner of the weather. The silence of the solitary struggle against the elements is replaced by the intense, inescapable proximity of your own family in the cramped, smoky space. But you are not left in isolation for long. A loud banging on your door, distinct from the howl of the wind, announces visitors. You lift the bar to reveal your neighbor, Thomas, his wife Elena, and their children, their shoulders cloaked in white, their faces red from the short, brutal journey from their hut to yours. They are not here for any specific purpose other than to escape the crushing monotony of their own four walls and to share the warmth of a different fire. Your small home, already crowded with your family and a cow, shrinks further. The air grows thicker, louder. This is the great paradox of a peasant winter. The season forces you into isolation from the wider world, but into intense, unavoidable intimacy with your neighbors. This forced proximity is a double-edged sword. It is a comfort, a bulwark against the terrifying loneliness of the long, dark season. It is also a pressure cooker, a sealed environment where petty grievances and old resentments can fester and grow entirely out of proportion. For now, it is a comfort. The adults huddle near the fire while the children immediately create a noisy, tumbling society of their own in the corner. The main currency of a social visit like this is talk. News, rumors, and gossip are passed back and forth like precious gifts. Thomas speaks of the poor health of the Lord's prized falcon, a story he heard from a groom. Elena whispers that the baker's wife is expecting another child, news delivered with a mix of congratulation and pity for another mouth to feed. This is the medieval version of the evening news or a social media feed, except it's delivered in person and its accuracy is entirely dependent on the memory and motivations of the teller. Eventually, the village's eldest resident, Old Marjorie, makes her way to your hut, drawn by the sound of voices. The children, bored of their games, flock to her, begging for a story. Her face, a roadmap of wrinkles illuminated by the firelight, softens. This is her role, her purpose in the winter. She is the village library, the keeper of the oral tradition. In a world where books are rarer than gold, culture and history are passed down through breath and memory. She begins a familiar tale, her voice raspy but compelling. Tonight, it's not a story of a distant saint, but a local legend of a knight who betrayed his lord for the love of the wood spirit, a story full of shadows, magic, and a bitter, tragic end. The children are rapt, their eyes wide in the flickering gloom. You and the other adults listen too, though you've heard it a dozen times. The story is part of you, as much a feature of the landscape as the river or the Lord's manor. It is a shared text that binds you all together. But as you listen, you are also aware of the complex web of tensions in the room. You like Thomas, but you haven't forgotten that his pig rooted up a section of your fence last year, a fence you spent 2 days mending. This is the central question of your social world, a topic historians still argue about. Was the medieval village a supportive moral economy, a community bound by shared faith and mutual obligation, where neighbors were the first and only safety net? Or was it a seething cauldron of envy, suspicion, and barely suppressed conflict, where the forced intimacy bred paranoia and resentment? You know, with a deep certainty, that it was both. You would risk your life to pull Thomas from a burning building, but you will never, ever forget about that fence. The conversation shifts from ancient legends to current affairs. A dispute has been brewing between two men over the ownership of a newborn calf. The cow wandered, the bull was of unknown origin, and now both men claim the valuable offspring. It's too small a matter for the manorial court, which is expensive and unpredictable. Instead, a quirky but effective form of local justice will be dispensed. A few of the village elders, including Old Marjorie, will hear the case right here, in the warmth of a hut, during the winter lull. They will listen to both men, confer, and then pronounce a judgment. Perhaps the calf's value should be split, or awarded to one man with a small payment made to the other. Their legal framework is based on two core principles. 1. What outcome will cause the least amount of future trouble for the rest of us? And 2. How can we resolve this without anyone having to walk too far in the snow? It's a surprisingly effective system. This talk of quarrels inevitably makes you think of your own. The enforced idleness of winter gives you too much time to brood. Your neighbor on the other side still hasn't returned the all he borrowed. You saw the Reeves' wife wearing a new ribbon that you're sure was bought with the unjust fine he levied against you. In the echo chamber of your mind, these small slights are magnified, replayed, and polished into shining grievances. Privacy is a concept as fantastical as a dragon or a comfortable bed. Your business is everyone's business, and their business is your only form of evening entertainment. The power of a wagging tongue is immense. A careless word, a malicious rumor, these are potent weapons in a small community. An accusation of cheating the tithe could bring the wrath of the priest. A rumor of a hidden food hoard could attract the desperate and the dangerous. And the most feared accusation of all, that of ill-wishing or cursing, could be a death sentence, planting the seeds of a witchcraft panic that could tear the village apart. But for all the quarrels and the claustrophobia, there is still the bond. The laughter at a shared joke, the communal sigh of relief when a story ends happily, the simple, profound comfort of not being alone in the vast, roaring darkness. These moments are the glue that holds your fragile society together. You are all trapped in the same icy prison, and you will either survive together or not at all. As the blizzard begins to subside, your visitors prepare to leave. They bundle up their children and slip back out into the white, newly silent world. Your hut feels suddenly spacious and quiet. The visit was both a comfort and a drain, a reminder of the bonds that sustain you and the resentments that chafe at you. You are one thread in an intricate, inescapable tapestry of kinship and conflict, and navigating it is as crucial to your survival as any other winter chore. The blizzard passes, leaving behind a world of stunning, silent white. The sun, for the first time in what feels like weeks, appears as a bright disk in a pale blue sky, making the snow-covered landscape glitter with a million tiny diamonds. A fragile, hopeful peace settles over the village. It does not last long. It is broken by a sound that makes your stomach clench, a sharp, authoritative rap on the door. It is not the friendly, hesitant knock of a neighbor. It is the sound of power. You know, with a grim certainty, who it is before you even lift the bar. It is the Reeve. He enters your hut without waiting for an invitation, bringing a gust of cold air with him. He does not huddle by the fire or accept a seat on a stoolie. He stands in the center of the room as if he owns it, which, in a way, is true. He is the Lord's man, the manager of the manor, the human face of the system that governs your entire life. He is better fed than you, his face fleshy and ruddy. His woolen tunic is of a finer weave and a deeper dye. He is an emissary from a different world, and his presence instantly changes the atmosphere in your home from a private sanctuary to a place of inspection. You are a villain, a serf, tied to this land by a web of obligations as strong and invisible as iron chains. This hut, your small garden, the strips of land you farm in the great fields, none of it is truly yours. You hold it at the pleasure of the Lord. In exchange for this privilege, you owe him. You owe him a portion of every sheaf of wheat, every chicken, every egg. But most of all, you owe him your time and your labor. And even now, in the dead of winter when the fields are sleeping under a thick blanket of snow, the Lord's demands never cease. This is why the Reeve is here. The great agricultural labors of plowing, sowing, and harvesting are paused, but there is always other work to be done. He informs you, his voice loud and devoid of warmth in the small space, that you are to report to the manorial barn at dawn tomorrow. The Lord's massive store of harvested grain must be threshed. You will spend the day in the cavernous, drafty barn, swinging a heavy wooden flail over your head, beating the grain from the stalks, a repetitive, exhausting, dust-filled task that will leave your shoulders and back screaming in protest. It is not a request. His visit is not merely to deliver orders. It is also an audit. His sharp, calculating eyes dart around your hut, taking in every detail. He notes the size of your woodpile, his gaze lingering long enough to make you nervous. He eyes the slab of salted meat hanging from the rafters, and you feel an irrational urge to hide it. He looks at your children, assessing their health not as a concerned neighbor, but as a farmer checking his stock. The Reeve has a unique talent for making you feel like a thief for the simple act of possessing enough to survive. He looks at your small sack of beans as if you've just stolen the family silver. You stand before him, your face a carefully constructed mask of dull obedience. But behind the mask, your mind is racing. Can you get away with feigning a cough tomorrow? Could you work just slowly enough to show your displeasure without inviting a beating? Historians still argue about how much real agency peasants like you possessed. Were you a passive, helpless victim of an oppressive and absolute system? Or did you have a whole arsenal of quiet, subtle tactics of resistance? The strategic foot-dragging, the feigned incompetence, the hidden cache of foraged nuts, these small acts of everyday defiance are the only weapons you have. They are a way to reclaim a tiny sliver of your own life from the Lord's grasp. The Reeve's gaze now falls upon the most valuable creature in the room, your milk cow, who is placidly chewing her cud in the corner, oblivious to the tension. The Reeve looks at the cow, then he looks at you, a pointed, meaningful glance that chills you to the bone. He is reminding you of the Harriet. This is perhaps the cruelest and most resented of all the Lord's dues. It is a death tax. When you, the head of this household, eventually die, your son will not be able to simply inherit your tenancy. To do so, he must first surrender your family's single best beast to the Lord. For you, that is this cow. Your son would have to lead this animal, the key to his family's future ability to plow their land and feed their children, up to the manor house as payment. The Reeve's silent, lingering glance at your cow is a stark reminder, even your death is a taxable event. The Harriet is the Lord's way of saying, my condolences on your recent loss. Now, about that cow. Having completed his business, the Reeve turns to your wife. He reminds her, his tone sharp, that the church scot, a yearly tribute of hens, is due to be delivered to the priest, a tax that, everyone knows, largely benefits the Lord. He gives the hut one last, sweeping, dismissive look. Then, as abruptly as he arrived, he is gone, leaving behind a profound silence and the lingering chill of his authority. The hut feels different now. It feels smaller, less your own. The reed's brief visit has shattered the fragile illusion of autonomy you had cultivated within these four walls. You are not the master of your small, smoky kingdom. You are a tenant, a laborer, a resource. The village quarrels and community bonds that occupied your thoughts just days ago now seem like the petty squabbles of children, insignificant in the face of this monolithic, unchangeable power structure that dictates the course of your life. Your fight is not just against the cold and the hunger. It is a constant, low-grade struggle against a system designed to keep you exactly where you are. You look at the fire, the symbol of your winter survival, and for a moment, its warmth feels like a borrowed luxury. The calendar, a thing you measure by saints' days and the phases of the moon, tells you it is February. The name itself, whispered in the gloom of the hut, feels cold and brittle. The faint, lingering warmth of the Christmas feasting is now a cruel memory, a ghostly echo of a life that is not yours. The days are growing noticeably longer, a few precious minutes of gray light added each afternoon. But this is a liar's promise, a trick of the light. The sun is higher, but the earth is still locked in ice, and the cold that seeps through the walls of your hut feels deeper and more personal than ever, a cold that has settled in your very bones. The true problem, the one that now eclipses all others, is the gnawing, hollow emptiness inside the hut, and inside your stomach. You perform the ritual of taking stock, but it is a ritual of despair. You go to the large sack that once held your family's supply of barley. When you lift it, your heart sinks. It is light, frighteningly so. The satisfying bulk of autumn is gone, replaced by a loose, sad collection of grains at the bottom. You no longer measure it out by the handful for the daily pottage. Now, you count. You dole out the grains with the miserly precision of a man counting his last coins, trying to balance the immediate, aching hunger of your children against the terrifying expanse of weeks that still lie ahead. The pottage pot, the ever-present heart of your hearth, now produces a thin, heartbreaking gruel. It is mostly water, clouded with a faint starchiness, in which a few lonely, translucent pieces of turnip and a scattering of barley grains float listlessly. It is warm, and for that you are grateful. It fills the stomach for an hour or so. But it provides no strength, no substance. It is the ghost of a meal, a memory of food. The great slab of salted pork that hung from the rafters is gone. All that remains is a small, greasy chunk of fat, wrapped in a cloth and saved for a true emergency, like the onset of another sickness. The pile of root vegetables in the corner has vanished, consumed week by week, until nothing is left but a few rubbery, shriveled carrots that look like witches' fingers. You find yourself looking at your own leather shoes and wondering, with a terrifying sincerity, about their nutritional value. Probably tough, you think, but the goose fat you rubbed into them might provide some energy. It's a diet plan born of pure desperation. This is the hunger gap, the mainstream historical reality of your year, the bottom of the great, slow-turning wheel of the seasons. This is the time when the stores of the last harvest run out, and the first growth of spring is still just a distant, unbelievable dream. Your body, deprived of the fuel it needs, has begun to consume itself. You feel it in the lightheadedness that swims over you when you stand up too quickly, in the dull, constant ache of your muscles, in the profound lack of energy that makes even the simplest chore, like fetching water, feel like a monumental effort. You see it in the pale, listless faces of your children, their usual boisterous energy replaced by a heavy, quiet lethargy. The stories and songs of the earlier winter have fallen silent. No one has the strength. This is when the old and the very young are at their most vulnerable, when a simple cold can be a final, fatal blow to a body already weakened by months of privation. In the darkest corner of the hut, a silent temptation tortures you. There sits a small, tightly woven, well-made sack, set apart from the others. It is full. It is heavy. It contains your seed grain, the precious, carefully selected seeds of barley and oats that you will need for the spring planting. This sack is not food. It is your family's future. It is the promise of August's harvest, the guarantee of survival for the next winter. To eat the seed grain is the ultimate taboo, the final act of a desperate man. It is to choose survival today at the cost of certain starvation tomorrow. And yet, the sack calls to you. In the dead of night, you sometimes find yourself kneeling beside it, your hand resting on its full, firm shape. The thought of grinding that grain into flour, of making a thick, life-giving bread, is so powerful it feels like a physical force, a sin you can taste. The gnawing hunger drives your thoughts to even more dangerous ground. You lie on your pallet, your stomach aching with emptiness, and you think of the Lord's woods. You think of the rabbits, their tracks of delicate lace in the snow. You think of the birds roosting in the frozen branches. The forest, which in autumn was a place of lawful gathering, is now a treasure chest of forbidden protein. The law is absolute, all game belongs to the Lord. To be caught poaching is to risk mutilation or the gallows. But what is the distant fear of the reeve's noose compared to the immediate certainty of your child's hunger? Historians still argue about this secret, nocturnal war. How common was poaching, really? Was it a suicidal act of final desperation, or a calculated risk that many peasants took to supplement their starvation diet? A constant battle of wits between a hungry populace and the Lord's gamekeepers. For you, the debate is meaningless. The question is sharp and simple: do you risk your life for the chance of a meal? After days of agonizing, you make your choice. Under the cover of a moonless, starless night, you slip out of the hut. You are not a hardened criminal. You are a farmer, a father, armed with a simple snare of twisted horsehair and a heart full of terror. You move through the woods like a ghost, every snap of a twig underfoot sounding as loud as a thunderclap. You are the hunter now, but you feel like the hunted. You find a rabbit run you've observed for weeks, and with trembling, numb fingers, you set your snare. You do not wait. You flee back to your hut, the secret of your crime a burning coal in your gut. The next day is an agony of paranoia. Every unexpected noise, every shadow passing the wind eye, could be the reeve coming for you. Finally, as darkness falls again, you return to the woods. Your heart is pounding. You approach the spot. The snare is gone. Your stomach plummets. But then you see it, a few feet away. The snare is pulled tight, and in it is the still, frozen body of a rabbit. A wave of fierce, triumphant, terrified joy surges through you. The rabbit is small and stringy, but in this moment, it is more beautiful than the king's crown. It is the most beautiful, a legal thing you have ever seen. Back in the hut, with the door securely barred, you prepare the forbidden feast. For the first time in months, the rich, savory smell of roasting meat fills the air, overpowering the usual smells of smoke and straw. It is the smell of life, of a terrible risk that is paid off. For this one night, you and your family eat. You chew slowly, savoring every mouthful, feeling the strength, the very substance of life, seeping back into your weary limbs. The gnawing ache in your stomach is, for a few blessed hours, silenced. But even as you eat, the image of the seed grain, safe in its sack, lingers in your mind. This desperate act has not solved your problem. It has only bought you time. The hunger gap is not yet closed. The rabbit feast is a distant, dreamlike memory. The gnawing hunger has returned, a dull and constant companion. The world seems trapped in a permanent state of gray, cold stasis. February has bled into March, and though you know by counting the days that spring must be closer, it feels no less like the heart of a frozen and unchanging winter. You have begun to despair, to believe that the cold will never end. You look at the precious sack of seed grain in the corner, and the temptation to surrender, to eat your future for one day of fullness, has never been stronger. Then, one morning, you are awoken by a new sound. It is not the howl of the wind or the crackle of the fire. It is a soft, rhythmic, liquid sound. Drip, drip, drip. You lie perfectly still, listening. It is the sound of water, falling from the edge of your thatched roof. For months, all moisture has been locked away as ice and snow. This sound, this simple dripping, is the sound of a world beginning to unlock. You rise and push open the door. The air that greets you is not the familiar, razor-sharp air of deep winter. The edge has gone. It is still cold, profoundly so, but it is a wet, soft cold, a cold that holds the promise of change. The sky is still gray, but it seems higher, less oppressive. You look at the ground. The hard, iron-like crust of frozen earth is gone, replaced by a dark, glistening sheen of moisture. The world is weeping. Over the next few days, the signs multiply, and you, a lifelong student of the seasons, notice every single one. The profound silence of the frozen world is broken. You can hear the gurgle of the stream, which has been silent under a thick lid of ice for months. You see the first flock of birds, a dark V against the pale sky, making their way north, a sight you have not seen since autumn. One morning, you hear one of them sing, a single, cheerful, defiant call that cuts through the morning mist, and your heart gives a little jump. You become a spy, an intense observer of your animal companions, your living barometers. The chickens, who have been listless and miserable all winter, are suddenly scratching with a renewed vigor, their clucking more energetic. And then, one afternoon, your wife comes in from their coop holding a small, perfect, miraculous object, a freshly laid egg. It is the first one in weeks. Your cow has begun to shed her thick, shaggy winter coat in earnest, leaving clumps of hair on the straw bedding. The animals know. Their bodies are responding to the lengthening days and the subtle shift in the air. They are preparing for a world of green. This growing collection of signs ignites a new feeling within you. It is not a sudden explosion of joy. You have been tricked by false springs before, those brief, warm thaws in late winter that are followed by another brutal, killing freeze. So you hold back. You nurture this new feeling carefully. It is a desperate, fragile hope, a tiny, green shoot pushing its way up through the frozen soil of your spirit. You are so focused on this new possibility that you almost forget you are starving, exhausted, and about to face the most punishing season of work. Hope is a very effective, if temporary, form of nutrition. And then you find the one sign that matters more than all the others. Driven by a newfound optimism, you take a basket and walk not to the woods for firewood, but to the south-facing bank of the stream, the place where the sun hits first. You scan the muddy, leaf-strewn ground. And you see it. A small patch of the most vibrant, shocking, beautiful green you have ever witnessed. It is a cluster of young stinging nettles. You kneel, and with careful fingers, you begin to pick the tender top leaves, ignoring the tingling sting on your skin. A little further on, you find the thin, green shoots of wild garlic, or ramps, pushing their way through the mud. You return to your hut not with wood, but with a basket full of weeds. To you, it is a treasure chest. Your wife washes the greens and throws them into the pottage pot. That night, your meal is transformed. The thin, watery broth is now a vibrant green, with the pungent, savory flavor of garlic and the deep, earthy taste of the nettles, which have lost their sting in the boiling water. For the first time in months, you are tasting something fresh, something alive. It is a flood of vitamins and minerals your body has been screaming for. It is, without exaggeration, the most delicious meal you can imagine. Finally, something new on the menu. Boiled weeds in a thin broth might sound like a dish from a very strange, very exclusive restaurant. For you, it is a 5-star feast. The fresh food, combined with the hope in the air, sends a surge of new energy through your weary body. But this energy is met with a competing emotion, a quiet, creeping dread. Historians still argue about the true psychological impact of spring on the medieval peasant. Was it a time of pure, unadulterated relief at the end of winter's hardships? Or was it also a source of profound anxiety? You know the answer is both. You are overjoyed that the cold is retreating, but you know that spring is not a time of rest. It is a frantic race against time. The ground is thawing, which means it must be plowed and planted, now, immediately. And you must undertake this back-breaking labor when you are at your absolute weakest, when your body is emaciated and your energy reserves are non-existent after the long hunger gap. Your body, having been in a state of semi-hibernation for months, is about to get a very rude awakening. It's like being shaken from a long nap and told you have to immediately run a marathon. You anticipate protests from several major muscle groups. The rhythm of your life is changing. The slow, indoor tasks of winter are set aside. Your focus is now entirely on the tools of the field. The wooden plow must be checked and repaired. The ox's harness needs to be mended. The iron plowshare needs to be sharpened. The work is moving outside again. You stand at the door of your hut as the sun sets. The air is soft, and it carries a new smell, not the sterile scent of frost, but the rich, damp smell of thawing earth, of life returning. A bird sings its evening song. The world no longer feels like a prison. It feels like a promise. The great, cold, hungry siege of winter is breaking. You have survived. You have made it to the other side. And as you look out at the muddy, messy, beautiful world, you feel a sense of quiet, exhausted, and profound relief. The time for surviving is over. The time for living, and working, is about to begin. The memory of the rabbit feast has faded, and the taste of the first spring greens, while miraculous, has not banished the deep hunger from your bones. The world, however, has made up its mind. The thaw is no longer a fragile promise, it is a messy, noisy, and definitive reality. The snow is gone, and in its place is mud. So much mud. It is a sea of churned, brown earth that pulls at your shoes and cakes your leggings. But this mud is the smell of life, the smell of potential. It is the smell of work. The time for indoor chores, for quiet mending and storytelling, is over. The frantic, Desperate race of the new agricultural year has begun. You lead your ox from the hut. The animal is thinner, his ribs more prominent after the lean months, his movements sluggish. He, like you, has survived the winter but has been diminished by it. He is not strong enough to pull the heavy, wheeled plow through the dense, wet soil on his own. So, in the gray light of dawn, you join your neighbor, Thomas. Your winter resentments over stray pigs and borrowed tools are forgotten, packed away for another season. Today, you are partners, and you lash your ox together with his, creating a team of two. It is still a weak team, but it will have to be enough. Before the iron plowshare bites the earth for the first time, you perform a small, quiet ritual. From a pouch at your belt, you take a pinch of salt, consecrated by the priest at the great Easter Mass of the year before. You touch the salt to the cold iron of the plow, whispering a short, simple prayer for a straight furrow, for the health of the oxen, and for a strong crop to rise from the soil. It is your way of inviting God into the field, of blessing the work before it begins. Then, the labor starts. Thomas guides the oxen from the front, his voice a series of low calls and clicks. You take your place at the rear of the heavy plow, your hands gripping the two wooden handles, your arms and back already tensed for the strain. The oxen lurch forward, and the plowshare digs into the earth with a great, satisfying sucking sound. A long, dark, fragrant ribbon of soil, black and rich, peels away and curls over. This is the work. It is brutally hard. Your feet slip in the mud. The handles of the plow jolt and buck in your hands as the share hits a hidden stone or a tough root. You have to use all your weight and strength to keep the furrow straight. Your ox, who has spent months enjoying the relative leisure of standing still and eating straw, is not thrilled to be back at work. His protests are silent but evident in his straining muscles and rolling eyes. You and he are in complete agreement about the sudden, unwelcome return to hard labor. But you both push on, driven by the inescapable demands of the season. As you work, turning over the soil strip by strip, your mind wanders back over the season of darkness you have just endured. The memory of it is like that of a long, oppressive, and frightening dream. The endless nights, the biting cold that made your bones ache, the gnawing hunger, the terror you felt when your child was sick, the reeve's intrusive visit, the desperate, illegal hunt for the rabbit. It feels both a lifetime ago and like it was only yesterday. You look at your own hands on the plow. They are thinner, the knuckles more prominent, the skin chapped and cracked, and you feel a quiet, profound sense of accomplishment. It is not pride or joy. It is the simple, weary satisfaction of the survivor. You made it. Not everyone in the village was so lucky. You think of old William, who passed in his sleep during the hunger month, his body too frail to withstand the long privation. His funeral was a small, quiet affair, another soul lost to the great, cold enemy. You are not the same person who huddled by the fire in November. The winter has scraped you down to your essential self. It has burned away any softness, any illusions. You have a new, visceral understanding of what matters, a warm fire, a full belly, the health of your family, the first song of a bird, the taste of fresh greens. The world is both harder and more beautiful than you remembered. Spring, you think, must be nature's way of saying, congratulations on surviving. Now, here is an enormous list of chores. The rewards program could certainly use a little refinement. You look out across the great, muddy field, at the vast expanse of earth yet to be turned, and you think about the future. Historians will one day argue about the fundamental outlook of a person like you. Were you defined by a deep, crushing fatalism, a belief that your hard life was God's will and could never be changed? Or did you possess a resilient, pragmatic, and stubborn optimism, a quiet hope that next year's harvest might be a little better, that your children might have a slightly easier time of it? Standing here, ankle deep in the cold mud, your aching body telling you of the work ahead, you know the answer is both. You feel the crushing weight of the endless, repeating cycle of labor, but you also feel the undeniable, irrational hope that rises with the scent of the freshly turned earth. At the end of the long day, you have only managed to plow a few narrow strips of land. It is a small beginning, but a beginning nonetheless. You unhitch the exhausted oxen and lead your weary animal back towards the hut. The soft evening light lingers in the sky. You are covered in mud, every muscle in your body is trembling with a new and fiery ache, but you are not defeated. You are a partner to the earth again. Inside the hut, the pottage is thick with the last of the wild garlic. It tastes like a feast. You eat, and then you fall onto your straw pallet, not into the fitful, anxious sleep of winter, but into the deep, dreamless, and profound slumber of a body that has earned its rest through honest, hopeful toil. You have emerged from the darkness. You are tired, you are hungry, you are poor, but you are alive, and a new year of work has begun. And so, the cycle of the seasons turns, and your year begins again. The deep, dreamless sleep of the weary peasant is a hard-earned mercy, a momentary release from a life of constant struggle and relentless labor. In the quiet darkness of the hut, with the faint, warm smell of the earth still clinging to his clothes, he finds a brief sanctuary, a peace that the waking world seldom offers. His world has been reduced to the fundamental truths of survival, and his rest is as profound as his toil was unforgiving. Just as the peasant finds this deep and necessary rest from his labors, you too can now let go of the long day that is behind you. The fields of your own life, with all their demands and worries, can lie fallow for a time, waiting quietly for the morning light. The village of your world grows still. The fires in every hearth have been banked, the doors have been barred, and a deep, collective quiet settles over the land, broken only by the soft sigh of a gentle night breeze. All the striving is over for now. All the anxieties can be laid down, like a heavy tool at the end of a long furrow. There is nothing left to do but to surrender to the peaceful, quiet dark. And now, as the last images of that distant, muddy field begin to soften and fade, it is time for your own rest. It is time to let your mind grow still, and to let your body grow heavy, and to drift gently into the deep, restorative, and peaceful sleep that awaits you now. Deep, deep sleep. Sweet dreams.
Dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh. chớp nhán nhán được rồi. Nó dằn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gỡ cho anh Thịnh. Thì chớp chớp nhán nhán được rồi. dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
Quay nó không có rõ đâu, không quay nó lại không có rõ đâu. Máy xịn kìa, nhưng máy này quay đâu.
Thì chớp chớp nhán nhán được rồi. dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
quay nó có lỗ đâu, không quay nó không có lỗ. Nói xịn kìa, chứ nói vậy quay đâu.
Thì chớp nhán nhán được rồi. Dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
quay
chớp chớp nhán nhán được rồi. dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
quay nó không có rõ đâu, không quay không có rõ. Má xịn kìa chứ má này quay đâu.
Thì chớp chớp nhán nhán được rồi. ngang tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
Quay nó có đỏ đâu, không quay không có đỏ. Nói xịn kìa, chứ nói này quay đâu.
Thì chớp chớp nhán nhán được rồi.